Hey guys, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. Let me cross my legs here. First, before I start talking about my topic, I want to thank Marna for the postcard. She sent me a little postcard from Redmond, Washington, if you can see that. Super charming. Doesn't it look quaint? Bicycle capital of the Northwest. That sounds like a great place to be. She sent this to me the middle of August. I just got it a couple of days ago from my post office box. Marna, I did watch your videos on YouTube of your group. It's called Lost Orchids. So I encourage everyone who likes 60s music to check that out. Unbelievable. I had so much fun watching those videos. Thank you for my postcard. You're the first one. So that's going to go on my fridge. I have to find a special magnet for my first postcard. But thank you very much. If you live somewhere interesting or you visit somewhere interesting and you are so disposed, send me a postcard. I think I have my address listed in my About section. If not, I'll put it there soon. So the topic today is, how do I handle situations where our guests are not complying with our direction? Say, for example, we have asked them to please put their phone on airplane mode and they don't, and they continue talking even though the boarding door has closed. How do I approach that situation? So there's a couple scenarios here, a couple topics. I wrote down topics like drinking their own alcohol, appearing intoxicated, children, exit row non-compliance. So I just wrote down topics and I'm gonna respond with however I might handle it at any given time. Each scenario here, each case might differ, and I might say something different or with a different inflection depending on the instance. So take each thing here with a small grain of salt, because if I say one thing on a Thursday, I might say something slightly different on a Friday, just because whatever, right? So let's start with children. So children aren't so much an issue. Lap children, the only issue I would have if a parent, we would ask a parent if they have a lap child, which is any child under 2. And this is all my airline, by the way. I don't know who you work for, what your rules are, but with our airline, any child under 2 can be held for the duration of a flight. The only problem with that, sometimes parents will buckle the child under the seatbelt, between the seatbelt and them. That's very dangerous for the baby. And so we would ask them to take the baby out of that situation and have it held outside of the seatbelt. Once in a while, they don't like the idea because they feel it's safer to have it seatbelted in with them, and we ask them to not do it. I would really stress, with all the love in my heart, please, for your baby's safety, in the event that we were to stop suddenly, your body weight would crush the baby. And I would be a little bit more descriptive that way because they may not understand why it's so important. So that's easy to handle. The trickier situation is when you have a child who's over the age of 2. In our airline, they're required to have their own seat and they have to be buckled in that seat for takeoff and landing like any other passenger, any other guest. So the trouble is sometimes 2-year-olds don't want to sit down. Sometimes they don't want to be buckled in the seat. And when they don't want to do something, they can have any experience from being a little fussy into becoming a demon. I've seen it both ways. I've seen children, 2-year-olds, become practically ninjas, climbing up their mother like a ninja because they wanted to not be seated with that seatbelt. So it's for everyone's safety that they're buckled in their seatbelt. We can't take off or land, really, when someone is up and about or not buckled in. So if we ask everyone to please buckle your seatbelt, and I see that this child is not, and the parent isn't really taking control and buckling that child in, I'm going to make a general announcement over the PA system. This is, by the way, if I'm flying lead, and that's my responsibility. If my lead is busy with something else, then I might make that announcement over the PA, but it's typically going to be the lead who does that in my airline, customarily. So I'd make a general announcement. Please, we do need to have all of our guests buckled in their seat for takeoff. That does include children. So please, if you have a child, please make sure that your child is securely buckled in the seat. I've made that announcement. If it is safe for me to be up and about in the cabin, and I notice that that child is still not buckled in, I'm gonna go over there. I'm gonna go low, I'm gonna stay quiet. So I'm talking only to these people and not to the entire aircraft. And I'm gonna look, I'm probably gonna approach the child first. Hey, sweetheart, how are you? Hey, cutie, how are you? Could you sit down for me? Do you know how to sit down? Can you buckle your seatbelt? And sometimes a stranger, especially someone who kind of looks different, you know, with this big white beard, when I ask them to do something, often enough, you'd be really surprised if you ask the child with a little respect, you know, hi, honey, sweet, could you please do this? Can you show me how to buckle your seatbelt? Frequently enough, they're like, oh yeah, I can do that. And that's great. And they're like, awesome, could you keep that buckled for a minute or a few minutes? And sometimes they comply, and it's really great. When mom and dad ask them to do it, sometimes it's not as effective. If the child isn't, I'm going to ask the parents to help back me up here. And really, I really do need that child, your beautiful child, for their safety to be buckled in their seat for takeoff or landing. Now, if that third try isn't working and it's not helping and we need to take off, I'm of course going to communicate with my lead if it's not me. And I'm definitely going to communicate with my flight deck, our flight officers, that's our first officer and our captain, and let them know of a situation. If we have the space to not take off, if we're not number one in the line of 30, the captain or the pilot who's ever piloting that flight might say, all right, just please go back there. We're expecting a lot of turbulence. Like coming out of Vegas in the summer, they're really going to want that baby buckled in, unless it's like we're not going to be able to take off for 45 minutes if we don't do it now, you know. So it's entirely up to our flight deck in terms of whether or not we take off with that child unbuckled in their seat. I have made every possible effort to make sure that that child is seated and safe. I've communicated with my flight deck, and if they say, don't worry about it, we're going to take off, just ask them to, you know, stay seated and get in your own jump seat because we're going to take off in a minute. That's how I would handle it. Almost every single time. There's very few variances from that, but that's how I would handle a child who doesn't want to sit down or buckle their seatbelt. I would do everything I could, but there's a certain point where I have done all I can. Exit row non-compliance. I'll speak for myself, when I am in position B or D in my airline, I would be briefing our exit row in terms of the safety responsibilities, the exit seat functions, exit seat criteria, and I would give them some direction in terms of looking at the safety information card. I'd open it up and I'd show them how to operate our emergency exit window, the overwhelming window exit or the exit door. Show them where the instructions are. And I would ask them the magic question. Well, first, do you have any questions? Second, I'd say, hey, are you willing and able to assist in the event of an emergency in this location? And I would like a verbal yes. A verbal yes would be ideal. And I'd make a hand motion and a gentle smile along and wait for everyone to say yes, 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 yes. Before doing that, if I had time, I would be in my exit row area and I'd sort of just ask general conversational questions. Hey, did everyone have a good time? Hey, did you have a good time in Vegas? The person I asked might be Arabic, or Middle Eastern, and be wearing some traditional garb. And I want to make sure that they understand English. Or if they're Asian and I hear them speaking Chinese or Japanese or Korean, if I hear them speaking a different language with their neighbor, I might say, hey, how are you guys doing? Have you had a nice experience so far? How's your day going? I'm going to ask anybody who doesn't seem particularly English speaking, if that makes any sense at all. Try not to, be too delicate. I don't want to be indelicate. If it doesn't sound like they understand English easily, I'm going to ask them some general questions. Hey, what's going on? Did you hear about our new hockey team in Las Vegas? What's your opinion? I don't know. And if they can't understand me and I get this vacant stare like, what? I'm going to ask them, so do you understand English enough to help us out with the emergency exit? Because one of the requirements is that they understand our direction without translation. And I certainly can't stop and speak slowly for someone who's got a little grasp on the language. If they don't speak English or can't understand our directions, I really can't be comfortable with them in my emergency exit row. So I would reseat them. If I have an open seat, particularly one that has a little extra room or is a nicer seat, it's less difficult. But I would have to reseat those people. And sometimes, especially if they don't speak English very well, it's really difficult to have them understand why. And for their own safety, why we're moving them to a different seat. If there's an open seat, great. If there isn't an open seat, I want to find someone who's willing to switch places with them. Most people would be happy to sit in an emergency exit row because it's got more leg room. So that is sometimes a little tricky. If they do speak a little bit of English, sometimes the first challenge is that they paid extra for that exit row seat. And I paid a lot of money for this exit row seat. Sometimes if we have time before we take off, we can have that fee refunded to them by one of our gate agents can help us with that. Or if they can't, we can encourage them to have that refund of that fee at their destination, and that can be done. And sometimes knowing that they didn't lose the money makes it easier for them to move seats and be more amenable. Sometimes on the very rare occasion, they are unwilling and will not. That's when I have to actually get my lead and my flight deck involved and talk with them about it. We may have to call someone, a gate agent or a CRO, if they are especially unwilling to move seats. They really, most of the time, acquiesce and move seats because they understand if they don't move seats, they're not taking that flight. So it can be a little delicate, and the first 1 or 2 times it happened to me, I really was very, very stressed and very anxious about having to reseat somebody. After a couple experiences, it's no problem. It's just part of our job. What else about, and non-compliance. What would they be non-compliant about besides language? Sometimes you'll get someone, this is Vegas, people have been partying, having a good time. They're not really wide awake sometimes when they're taking that flight. And you get these people who will like be in a window seat, slumped against the window, headphones on, hoodie over their eyes, and they're already asleep. Before I give them my briefing, I have to make sure that everyone has their earphones out, masks off, and they can hear me, that they're paying attention. If they refuse to take their headphones off, I can ask them, really, please, sir, I really do need you to hear me. This is for your safety. Most of the time they acquiesce. If they refuse and they're giving you this attitude like, dude, I've heard this before. I don't need you to tell me this again. I have to say this every flight. I do apologize. You know, no, I don't want to repeat myself either, but this is information I want to make sure that you get. And most of the time they're good, but if they refuse and they're giving you such a fight, if they're really, really causing a fuss and they just don't want to even literally take their headphones off, sometimes it can be extreme and you'll get kind of this random joker who doesn't want to really comply at all. Once again, I would talk to my lead and my flight deck and say, hey, this is what's going on. This guy is being totally non-compliant and he's not paying attention to anything I say. Once again, this is someone I'm not comfortable with in my emergency exit row. And most often, my lead is going to have my back. My captain is going to have my back. This is my area of compliance. This is my exit row. If I don't feel that this person is sincerely, honestly, not because I'm in a bad mood, but if I sincerely and honestly feel that these people are not capable of helping us out in the event of an emergency, they do not belong in my exit row seat, and my captain is typically going to have my back on that. And when my captain has my back on it, these people are either going to move seats or they're not going to fly with us. And you have to have some authority in these situations. I do want to see that authority tempered with love, a word I frequently like to use here, compassion and empathy. Put yourself in their shoes. You don't want to move either, but in this situation you have to. So, so try to come at it with some authority, but also with a little love, compassion, and empathy. And if you show respect frequently enough, people will move. They understand they're going to have to move, and they do it. This isn't about compliance so much, but when my exit rows are empty, if I have open seats, this is a customer service thing, which is kind of an aside. If I have some empty seats in my exit rows, as people are boarding, I'm keeping my eye open for those people who are super tall. I'm 6'2", I'm just about 6'2". In my airline, we have super snug seats. For some odd reason, the tallest people are always in the very back where our seats are super close. So as people come on board, if I see a super tall person, I'm going to keep my eye on them. And if I have an empty exit row seat, before I do my briefing, I'll stop by and say, hey, if I have an empty seat in the exit row, would you like to pop up and have a seat? Yes, always. So when I hear boarding is complete, I'll wave them forward and have them sit down, and then I will brief everybody in that exit row. That's just a little bit of customer service I try to do. It alleviates the discomfort for that guest, and it really shows to everyone around them that we're doing a little bit extra that we don't need to make sure that people are comfortable, and they're usually pretty happy. The people who are sitting next to that empty seat aren't always happy with you because they were looking forward to putting their stuff in that seat, but customer service. Drinking their own alcohol on board and appearing intoxicated, those two can go side by side. We're in Vegas. People like to pre-party before they get on the flight sometimes, or they're drinking on the way back from where they're going because they've been drinking for a week straight and they're still doing it. It is against federal regulations to aviation regulations to consume your own alcohol on board. Mainly, I think it's because I don't know how much you've had to drink, and I can't have someone intoxicated in my aircraft 7 miles in the air for a number of hours. Anything could happen, right? So no one can drink their own alcohol on board. If I feel a certain energy for certain people when they're boarding, sometimes I can kind of get a feel for people. And when they're boarding, and if I'm flying lead, I'll sort of jokingly tuck into my boarding announcements, hey guys, just a friendly reminder, it's against federal aviation regulations to consume your own alcohol on board, so please do not drink anything you brought on board with you. Please keep it sealed. We do have plenty of alcohol on board, so if you're in the mood for a cocktail, please let us know. They're cheaper than the drinks are on the strip, so just let us know. We'll take good care of you. And that usually stops people from drinking their own alcohol, usually. Once in a while, when going through the aisle to do a little trash run, I'll see someone slipping a bottle or a mini that we did not sell them into the seat back pocket or into their bag. And I have no problem anymore. I used to be a little anxious of stopping and saying, hey, I just noticed the mini or the bottle, and it doesn't look like one that we've actually sold you. So I'm going to ask you, please, once again, to not consume your own alcohol on board. I appreciate it. It is against the law. I want to be the good guy, but please don't do it. And usually they take care and they pay attention. I do want to pull this out. I have my flight attendant manual. It's under guest experience. If they insist on drinking their own alcohol, or if they smoke, oh my God, if they smoked a cigarette on board, and they are not paying attention to my direction. We have this card called a Title 14 card, and the paper itself is kind of stiff, unlike the regular paper that tears really easily in my manual. I can give them this card, and it reminds them that what they're doing is against the law. It's a federal law not to interrupt me from doing my duties, to drink your own alcohol on board, to smoke. There are certain things that are against the law. And if they continue to do those things, there are penalties and fines, and there could potentially be a problem with authorities meeting you on board. So if they're not listening to me, I can give them that card so they can read it themselves, so they can hopefully better understand the problem. And if they still are non-compliant, then if we have not closed our boarding door, I'm going to be asking for some authorities. If we're in the air, I may ask my captain and my lead, if I'm not the lead, to let the people on the ground know the situation, so we may have authorities meet them at the plane as well. There are repercussions. Sometimes there are no fees. There are no fines. Sometimes it doesn't happen. But the threat of that usually stops people from doing it. It is a big issue. I was actually on a Frontier flight when a guest went in the back galley and lit up a cigarette, started smoking a cigarette. I don't know what you know about oxygen systems on an aircraft, but the entire aircraft is laced with oxygen. Gaseous oxygen in our lavatories and solid chemical oxygen in our overhead, the compartments above the seats. We don't need open flame and solid oxygen. It's a very unpleasant combination at 7 miles in the air. So it is a pretty serious offense, smoking and drinking. Appearing intoxicated. I can't tell if someone's intoxicated. I'm not a medical professional. I have not done a breathalyzer on them, nor will I ever do that. But if someone does appear intoxicated, particularly if they weren't earlier, it could be a sign that they're drinking their own alcohol on board. Or if they appear intoxicated as they're coming on board, if they seem intoxicated, I'm going to ask one of my coworkers to verify with their own eyes what they see happening. I'm probably not going to say, hey, do you think this guy's intoxicated? I'm probably going to ask my coworker to say, hey, is there anything unusual you can tell about this guest? Is there something you might have a problem with? Not to plant a seed in their mind. And if they say, oh boy, I really think he's drunk, we're going to go to our lead and we're going to talk to our flight deck as well. And if they are intoxicated, drunk, not just like feeling happy and they're okay, but they're slurring, they're showing signs of inebriation, it's not safe for them to fly. It really isn't. It's not safe for them or the people around them. And chances are they're probably not going to be on my plane for very long. Not my plane. The airplane, not my plane, because I'm not that rich. So I always want to make sure that someone else agrees with me that it's an issue. We're going to communicate with our captain, and if they're severe enough, we may ask them to deplane and take a later flight when they're more sober. Sick before closing doors. If they're already sick, hopefully our gate agent is, our guest service agent is aware of behaviors in the gate area and can see if someone's either really intoxicated or showing signs of severe illness. If someone's sweating bullets, if they're coughing up phlegm, you know that sound like the flu or bronchitis. If they're blowing their nose in, it's just all crazy mucus kind of stuff. Hopefully that guest doesn't get on the airplane. Hopefully that guest service agent, our gate agent, stops them from even getting on board. If they don't, because they're doing 10,000 things at one time, that guest might be coming on board, and I want to catch that before they even sit down. When they're coming on board, I hopefully catch it and say, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? Are you going to be okay to fly? Yeah, I'm fine. Maybe they're not. For everyone's safety, people who look really contagious aren't going to be flying with me on that trip probably. I'm going to talk to my lead. If I'm not the lead, I'm going to talk to my flight deck and let them know. And oftentimes the flight deck is going to back us up and they're going to agree with us. They trust that we know what our jobs are and they trust we understand the safety of our guests. So they're frequently going to back us up. If they're not like that, but they're throwing up before we even take off, really look at that. Maybe it's nerves. Maybe they're nervous. Maybe they're had bad sausage at breakfast, whatever. They're throwing up and they're okay. That's one thing. There's another kind of throw up, and there's another kind of illness, and you can only experience it, see it when you see it, where someone's probably not safe to fly. If you have someone who's throwing up 3 and 4 times before you've even taken off, you want to talk to your lead, you want to talk to your flight crew, and then talk to the guest and say, are you safe to fly? It may not be the right time for you to fly with us. Let's talk with our gate agent about what potential we might have for you on another flight. The people next to that person don't want them to fly with them. No crew member wants them to fly, because no crew member wants to, like, literally the times that you'll see vomit on our aircraft is considerable. You're going to see it fairly often. And when someone's just throwing up and throwing up and throwing, it's not safe for them to be in the air. Another one, physical fights, and that's probably the last one I wrote down here. Physical fights. You know, my airline, there's a couple YouTube videos about people fighting on board our aircraft. I think the only instances, I've only seen it twice on my aircraft. Twice, when both times it was a couple coming on board. The first couple were clearly having a disagreement, an argument, and it was getting a little rough. They were kind of tossing elbows and shouting at each other. And when they were coming on board, I was lead in both cases. I was lead, and I said, hey guys, how are you? I'm sensing a little energy. Is there anything I can do? Are you guys going to be okay to fly? Are you okay? And they both were like, oh yeah. They did not notice that they were as obvious about their fight as they were. And they calmed down right away, and they were fine the entire flight. The second time, and I watched them, I definitely kept my eye on them. The second couple, not so much. They were really fighting. I was surprised that she didn't punch him in the face. She may have even tried. It was an all-out fight as they're coming on board. And I said, hey guys, I'm going to ask you to kind of bring it down a little bit. What's going on? Are you guys going to be okay to fly? Because you don't look like you're going to have a good time. And they were like, we're fine. Really? I knew that we happened to have quite a number of open seats on that trip. And so rather than, you may notice so far that not once have I said, I'm going to kick someone off the plane. You'll notice I didn't say that. You're going to notice I rarely said call the authorities, only under real dire situations. And I'm never going to threaten someone with calling the authorities. I'm never going to threaten a guest with being removed from our flight. I probably shouldn't say never, because who knows, it might happen. I'm rarely ever going to get to that point. I'm going to try to always approach the situation with patience, love, and tolerance to temper my authority. Because if I start leading with authority, without love, without care, without respect, it's going to be a crap show going on. So this couple, I said, hey, I've got some open seats that are separated from each other. Would you guys mind, just for takeoff, would you mind sitting apart just to give yourself some time to cool off? And they both thought it was a great idea, and they both wanted to get apart away from each other. That's probably why they're fighting. So they sat in different sides of the aircraft, and they were fine. They both fell asleep right away, and they barely woke up once during the flight. So it was like a perfect solution. If they had continued fighting and were being as physically kind of violent towards each other as they were, I don't know if I would have had them even board the plane. I would have asked them to kind of hang on for a minute with me up in the galley while I called my captain or my gate agent and potentially the authorities, because it could have gotten really scary. But you'll notice a couple things I said. You've heard that I communicate with my lead and my coworkers and my flight deck. That's a consistent across the board every time. Communication with my lead every single time. If it's something we can't take care of or we don't have the authority to take care of, we're going to bring our flight crew, our captain, who is ever piloting the trip. We're going to bring them in and ask for their assistance, because whatever the captain says is done. And so if the captain agrees with you, they're off the plane, they're getting off right now, they're off. One instance, and I'll wrap this up because I'm already talking for too long. One instance where I was lead, one of my flight attendants, one of my coworkers came up and said that a guest had touched her inappropriately. He had drawn his finger up the back of her leg, lifting her skirt a touch. That's all he did. That was in one fluid gesture. He didn't continue molesting her beyond that, but that was molesting her clearly. And she spoke to him sternly, and she told him he was not to do that again. She came up and told me, as she should have. And when the captain came out, actually, a moment later to use the restroom, I let him know. And he made it very clear that if this man were to do it again, we would land this plane in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And we would take care of him and take him off this plane, and he may not fly us again. That the captain was not having it. You do not physically touch one of the flight attendants in an intimate fashion. It is not done, and our captain had our back. He was actually more descriptive. I can't say the words he used on YouTube. So communicate. Lead with love, compassion, patience, tolerance, followed up with and structured by authority, because you are the authority on board that plane. I have spoken for way too long. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you feel there's something I left out of this video, or there's something you'd like me to comment on further, let me know. I can either respond in the comments below, or I can add that to a future question and answer video or something. And I want to thank you very much, and I will talk to you soon. Fly safe, and I'll see you later. Bye.